I think one important learning is that you don't need to do everything by yourself. And it's also part of the whole sustainability or circular economy logic that you can buy certain things as a service.
Got my coffee and today's guest here with me, so we're ready to roll. Welcome to the Circular Coffee Break podcast, where we'll be casually talking about everything circular and beyond. Now, my guest today is Edward Blomstedt, CEO and co-founder of Combi Works and the creator of FaaS. And I'm really looking forward to talking with him about circular economy, sustainability in the manufacturing industry, Industry 5.0, and in specific, their factory as a service model. Welcome to the show, Edward.
Hey, thanks super much. It's really a pleasure to be here and fun to kick off the new week with a discussion with you.
Perfect. Really looking forward to our conversation. Now, to get us started, Edward, can you maybe share a little bit about your journey and what led you to where you are today?
Yeah, no problem. It's actually a bigger and longer story than I think we have time for, but just to sort of try to comprise it to a few words. So I'm CEO of Combi Works, as you said, and this is a company that has two business segments. One is the infra products, which are products towards the construction industry and such, very heavy industry type things. And then the other business segment is what we call manufacturing services, where we then do basically factory as a service and supply chain services as a service element that we provide to other companies. And we try to look at manufacturing and the supply chains as a strength that we can build as strengths to other companies and make them able to realize their potential without fixing or drawing on big fixed investments themselves. And my own kind of background, how we got to here is, of course, a longer story. But I was studying in what used to be Helsinki University of Technology. Nowadays, since some years ago, it's renamed Aalto University. But so I did my mechanical engineering and industrial management thesis there, and have been working in different fields from in investment banking and insurance sales in retail, in Stockmans and so on. And then I kind of found my way into entrepreneurship through our, together with my mother back in the days, and then it grew into a company, Combi Works. And we always try to think about how can we do things a little bit differently. So how can we we were thinking about our own manufacturing for the manhole covers that we started with. And in fact, in these manhole cover products, we're still market leaders in Finland and Estonia and big in Sweden and so on. But we wanted to think that, okay, supply chains are so critical to what we're doing. So how can we make that into our strength? And while doing so, we thought that, okay, if we manage to do this, how can we also package this and offer it to other people, other companies, so that they could make it their strength? And while we did that, then we started thinking that, okay, it's one thing to have your supply chain and your partners and so on. Another thing is how to control it and make it scalable. And that then led into developing a software for doing this, which then became subsequently FaaS. And all of these then kind of tied together to form this thing that we, in retrospect, can call a vision, but which perhaps in the very moment was a puzzle of many parts that perhaps kind of needed to grow from each other.
that fall into the right place. Now, really interesting. And I remember, I think it was roughly 5 years ago when we first met, and when you presented the factory as a service model in the back then the digitally circular event. So it's really interesting to see how you have been developing from there further, and how you've been adding new elements and new components around this very complex topic of supply chain. I mean, supply chain is difficult, and in today's world, it's not getting any easier with the geopolitical situation, with a lot of supply chain shortages around the world. So I think it's a really interesting approach and concept you've been following there.
You are right, and I've kind of played back over the years, or tried to reconnect with my thoughts over the years. And I was always kind of feeling that, okay, now there's this situation of turmoil. Once we get past this, it will be kind of smooth sailing. But I've now come to realize that it seems like there's no such thing as smooth sailing, that it's a constant kind of wave function where something happens.
It seems to be the new normal. I fully agree. I mean, there's continuously new topics coming up, new difficulties coming up. Now, Combi Works offers, like you mentioned it, the factory as a service model and also supply chain services. Could you maybe elaborate a little bit more? What was the motivation behind that to develop the FaaS model, the supply chain services solutions, and bring them to market? You already started to talk a little bit about that. Could you maybe extend a little bit on that?
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about that. How did we end up where we are? So I think that the motivator at different stages have been different. But when we started off, we had these manhole covers. And at the time, I was still studying at the university. I was working as a market analyst in a business intelligence company. And I was also, I think, working in holidays in Stockholm just to, earn some money, and then also started this company. And at that time, it was, exciting. You have a product, didn't really make a difference that what is the product perhaps, but it felt like you're building your own thing. And so then we ended up in a situation where we had a partner. He happened to be Russian, and we ended up in certain difficulties with him, basically being, I don't know, not tricked or scammed, but or kind of, let's say, trying to take what was not his, and we ended up in a big dispute, and we basically had three options: either to accept to be held hostage in your own company, or to shut down the whole business and just give it up, or a third one was to figure out our own manufacturing and supply chains and make sure that the company is sustainable and can grow. And so we very early on had to kind of solve that. How do you build a sustainable supply chain? And at that time, sustainable didn't mean the green thing as it's kind of referring to today. Sustainable at that point meant that you have capacity, you have an ability to be flexible, and you can manufacture what you need so that you can grow. And in addition to this, we also try to figure it out so that we build it based on manufacturing partnerships, so that we can release basically our capex from machinery to product development and to expansion. And that kind of sowed the seed that later on became kind of the factory as a service model. So at first we were thinking, how do we save our own company? Then after succeeding in doing this, we kind of basically had this child of what we had accomplished, that was a model how to manufacture and how to harness existing manufacturing capacity and how to do it globally. And then we kind of packaged it and found the first customers for the service of ours, and then it started kind of growing on top of that. And at first, it was more simple stuff, could be just castings. But nowadays, what we've gone to is that we're making extremely complex manufactured equipment. We're producing complete production lines to sawmills or other factories, and it's actually rather, even for myself, and I guess you're allowed to be a bit subjective about your own company, but so I find it very intriguing and exciting somehow to see the extent of the things and the complexity of the things that we're actually producing with our model and delivering to our customers, and seeing that the customers are happy with those as well, of course.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I think what's great about it, you alluded to the economic dimension of sustainability, basically making it economically sustainable. But there's a very close interrelation between the economic, the societal, and the environmental side of this, because naturally the factory as a service model, as you've been building it up, is a model that supports the circular economy in its basics. Basically, not everyone building their own manufacturing capacity, their own factory, but basically using resources in a much more efficient way. So by solving an economic problem, you basically, as a byproduct, almost solved an environmental, a societal problem. And I think that is where these are the best business models. These are the best way of addressing that, when all of these come together at the end of the day, and you're not just solving for one of them independently in that context. And it's great to see how you're able to really address also complex production tasks, problems in that context.
Yeah, I think that was one of the drivers. Also, you were asking that how did we end up here? So I think that for us, or for me back then, I felt like I wanted to do something that is more complex. At first, you're young, maybe you have the energy and the drive, but sometimes you don't maybe have all the knowledge. But I was kind of thinking that, hey, manhole covers, okay, we've done this. That was not true, by the way. We had not done it. We were just getting started. But nonetheless, I thought that, hey, we've done this. Okay, now we need to do something more. And so it kind of drove us onto this path to start thinking more holistically on supply chains. And now in retrospect, I think that that's part of what is kind of exciting to me, that the parts and the products, the places where we go to see what we have done is truly actually exciting. I mean, at least for an engineer, I always struggle. My wife is not always as convinced that it's as exciting as I think it is, but today I'm allowed to have my opinion.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and it is great to see how things develop, and I agree with you. I think sometimes the approach of the youth there makes it easier to make this leap of faith, basically saying like, yeah, we haven't really done that yet, but let's go for the next big thing. Let's move on. Let's do something bigger, something more exciting in that context. Now, I understand your customers are mainly in Northern Europe at the moment. How do your customers accept and use the solution of factory as a service, but also the supply chain services? And could you maybe mention a couple of typical use cases? You already mentioned like it's getting complex and more complex over time, but what are some of the areas that your customers are using these services?
Yeah, that's a good question, and maybe I should try to describe the difference between the two models that we are in. And here I think that it's maybe also something that we need to admit that our naming should be perhaps easier for anyone to kind of understand immediately the difference. But so we have two models here. One is factory as a service. Mm-hmm. And the other one is supply chain service. Factory as a service is where our customer buys factory production, meaning physical products from us. And that means that they send us drawings, we quote, and they buy the product from us. And within this, of course, is the fact that we have 100 or so factories, and we have very extensive capacity, and we can do all kinds of different products and components and assemble them and deliver. But it's still a physical product that they're buying from Combi Works. Supply chain service, on the other hand, is that they take in Combi Works as part of their organization. We become their procurement and purchasing and supply chain part, and we kind of continue using their current suppliers, but also link on our supply chain so that overnight their supply chain capacity grows, their capabilities grow, and we also bring in our manufacturing know-how and knowledge that we harness to improve the manufacturability. And in this way, we basically enhance their capabilities, and we have managed to show that we can bring down their manufacturing costs while expanding their manufacturing capabilities. And so factory as a service, physical product that you buy from Combi Works, supply chain service, you get a organization or a new part into your organization. And these kind of are very different on this level, but then of course the elements that go into it are similar, and it's just depending what fits better for the customer company. And our objective with this is, and the way we see it is that especially with the supply chain service, we are able to be very clearly partners together, and it's a very similar or a very clear win-win, same boat situation, that the better we succeed, the better they succeed. Together we grow, and together we kind of earn, so to speak.
Yeah, that makes sense. Makes sense. And I mean, we already talked a little bit about the circularity impact of the factory as a service model. What is the broader impact around circularity and sustainability that you see in these business models and services? And also, why do you think companies are interested in adopting it? Is it purely the economic side, or is it also the possibility to actually produce more sustainably, learn from your experience and expertise in this area?
That's a very good and complex question. I feel that the financial bit, the economical bit, is easy. You kind of see that component A costs this much or that much. It's easy to compare. It's easy to make the financial evaluation. But then the sustainability part is something that I value highly myself, and that what our company values, and that we're trying to build into a strength for our partners. But this one is difficult to put into a clear monetary value. So we feel that we have a possibility to push on the sustainability part there. We can push our factory partners to get their sustainability certification and carbon footprint measuring in place. But it also is, of course, a longer project. So not everyone will be ready immediately, and actually nobody will be ready immediately, but some are taking first steps and others are coming afterwards. And I think it will be a strength for the ones that have put it in place. And now that is something that kind of is consistently there everywhere, that companies seem to be kind of struggling to know that, is this something they have to do? And EU regulations have, I think, made it rather clear you have to do something about it. And so then it has started, I feel, now finally pushing companies within the manufacturing sphere to take these steps and certify themselves, and they're trying to find, a suitable certification body within a myriad of different options and alternatives. And that also is kind of a confusing area. That, do I choose this one or that one or these or the, and how do they differ? And if everyone needs to do this evaluation themselves, that's a lot of work put into something that hopefully could be easier if someone does a good job in selecting and then the others implement. So we're trying to do this selecting so that our partners can do a faster job in the implementation work. And this then creates value and saves costs for the whole supply chain. Then we come to the question that you were asking, that how do you value it? So I cannot, with hand to heart, I can't say that companies are able to say that it's valued like this. And I think that's part of the problem. I think that they now know that you have to do something for it. If you're producing in Asia and bringing to Europe, you know that there's the CBAM regulation or a customs border line, which means that you need to start reporting for certain products already today, and you can probably assume that more and more products will be pushed under the CBAM regulation. So you know that, okay, if it's critical for you to manufacture in Asia, you will need to think about this carbon footprint measuring back there. On the other hand, if it's manufactured in Europe, you know that the CSRD regulation requires that you start doing something if you're a big enough company, but you also already see that the bigger companies are asking their supply chain to do so. So it will kind of trickle down, to sadly use a Republican term, trickle down into smaller and smaller factories and put requirements on companies. So now coming back to your question, that is it valued? I think it's currently still often valued because you feel that sooner or later something has to be done, or that you hopefully see that there will be a competitive advantage to you in case you are already among the first ones to have it in place. And I think these are the two kind of drivers there. And once someone figures out a smart way to put a monetary value to it, then you will have the third kind of driver for this.
Absolutely. I think you're making a really good point there. At the same time, I mean, you mentioned the regulatory framework or the regulatory development. Supply chain transparency has been a big topic in Germany, will become a big topic on EU level now that the legislation is put in place. You see all these wonderful acronyms from CSRD to whatever other abbreviations we have there. All of that is basically hitting companies, and a lot of it is hitting or will be hitting the supply chain in that context. So it's very difficult for companies to continuously stay on top of what's happening. At the same time, you see new consumer demands. I just read a consumer study that basically predicts that in the B2B and B2C space, sustainability in all its facets, so the societal as well as the environmental side, will become more and more of a criteria. So all of this is happening at the same time for procurement departments, for supply chain professionals to incorporate. So I think there is a need to upskill in a very, very rapid manner in order to address all of these demands that are hitting companies of all sizes, as you said. I mean, it starts officially with the big ones, but the small ones won't be safe for long because the big ones will definitely push this down the supply chain as a requirement.
That's true, and the supply chain is it's a difficult animal, so to speak. We were in Europe way too dependent on Russian energy, and that hit us hard. Now I think, are kind of debating a little bit about the situation with China, and I think that there is also kind of two-pronged thing here, that if we were to overall take a turn away from, for example, China, and show our backs and say that we're not interested in doing business with you, that will also probably then further exacerbate the drive on their side further away from us. On the other hand, so I would not perhaps hope that we would take too drastic moves. And on the other hand, we also do understand that we don't want to be completely dependent on anyone, just as I don't think that China wants to be completely dependent on us either. So I think that there's also a healthy drive now in moving manufacturing somewhat back to Europe, and it also drives investments into manufacturing in Europe, and inevitably the manufacturing that is being built now will probably be with modern equipment, which will be more sustainable than the oldest there is. So there's always kind of ups and downs and pros and cons to every step. But I think that what I see is also quite interesting investments into manufacturing capacity happening in Finland, happening in Europe, and I think that we need to figure out how we as a whole can make this also our strength, so that we strengthen our unity and make sure that we are able to remain the strong force that we have the chance of being. And I hope that these sustainability requirements that we have put on our industry can be one of the drivers that also finds the unity that we hopefully, or that we definitely need.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And onshoring or backshoring or whatever you want to call it has been a topic already for some time that's being discussed, that's being on the agenda. And I think we're seeing that exactly due to the supply chain disruptions globally that we've been experiencing. Now, the coffee is unfortunately empty, but let me ask you one final question. I mean, what advice would you give to a company looking to transition towards like these more sustainable practices that we talked about in manufacturing, in supply chain management? What are some of the learnings you can share that would help a company exactly jump this skill gap that many companies have, basically stay on top of these things, address these future demands? Are there any learnings you could share?
I think one important learning is that you don't need to do everything by yourself. And it's also part of the whole sustainability or circular economy logic that you can buy certain things as a service. So be it that you find a partner for the sustainability part if you want to niche it down to a smaller segment, or what I have seen, which I feel is something that we also want to do ourselves. We have seen some of our customers, partly on their own, partly with our support, be able to build a very, very scalable model, and they can focus on their customer market. They can focus on their R&D and improving their products, and this way focus on growing, and then have partners that are taking care of, well, obviously I am talking about procurement because that's where we know what we do and we know how to make that part. But I think that in general, finding partners with whom you can build an organization and a company that is stronger than what it would be alone, I think is a very important learning and finding for me. And I think that looking at, very few companies have their internal legal team, at least in our small and mid-sized company size. So you wouldn't necessarily have a bunch of lawyers in-house, and you wouldn't necessarily even have accounting in-house. You buy many things outsourced already. So I think that my learning from circular economy, my learning from my business history is that finding partners with whom you can build something that is stronger as a team is viable economically, as well as tapping into this circular economy logic in general. And I think that it helps you on many other aspects and not just on, in procurement, it's not just about the cost of the product, it's so many other things. And I think that when you find a good partner for whatever area you want, it's not just that one niche. It helps in many other areas. So I think finding good partners is something that I value more and more, and not working with companies and people that are difficult to be with is also maybe a learning over the years.
Absolutely, and I think you're spot on there. I mean, circularity, sustainability is a team game. I think hardly any company can be circular, can be fully sustainable on their own. So I think there is a fundamental rethinking of how a company actually operates, moving from the traditional, more inwards direction and view, more towards an outwards direction and view. As said, the coffee is unfortunately empty. We could continue, I guess, for another half hour, but it's unfortunately time to wrap up the episode of the Circular Coffee Break. Thanks, Edward, for joining me today. Really
Thank
interesting.
You so much.
Great. For all of you listening out there, as always, we hope you found today's episode interesting, inspiring, and you got a couple of new ideas on how to approach your supply chain, procurement, manufacturing. If you like the podcast, you can help us grow the Circular Coffee Break community by giving us a 5-star rating and a positive review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find your podcasts. Also, please remember to subscribe to stay in the loop on new episodes. They will drop every 2 weeks. And there's a lot of interesting guests already lined up for the second half of the year. So all left for me now is to thank you all for listening, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all here at the Circular Coffee Break podcast.